Like I was able to get in. Yeah. Now let's pause it. Okay, I wanted to start right on time because I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I'm sure people will trickle in. But hopefully, this particular meeting is being recorded and accessible via Zoom. So if people weren't able to join us in person, at least they'll be able to follow along virtually. So if we haven't met, my name is Manny Gonzalez. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation. I want to thank those of you that were able to make it today to talk about our facility rental packet and the revision. A few things that I wanted to go over in terms of our agenda for today is kind of review our meeting schedule. So we do have 4 meetings that are scheduled through April. I will say that my intent was to have meetings outside the context of this room, but because the library's community room is being, actually not the community room, but the courtyard outside the community room is being redone, that facility is inaccessible. So I might have to change the dates of the 2 meetings in February and March to be on Tuesday, February 20th and Thursday, March 14th. I won't do that unilaterally. So my plan is to send another doodle poll and try to get some feedback, both in terms of meeting dates and times, because I know everybody here obviously was able to make a 4 o'clock, but I didn't get a whole lot of response, and the majority wanted 4 o'clock. I think some people would probably be more able to attend if it was a little bit later. So I do want to make sure that as a group, we're making that decision. So for today, the first meeting, there are a couple of topics that we're covering. The first one is to determine whether Oceanside should reinstitute the Athletic Federation or develop a sports council, including membership requirements and what that role would be. The second topic is to determine what is the percentage of residents for a group to be considered a resident group. So in the meeting in February, we have a couple topics as well. That the first one is to determine whether Oceanside should continue to have 2 allocation periods, or if the department should have 3 or 4 allocation periods, what works best for the community at large. The second topic is to determine whether priority should be given to programs during their traditional season and to define those seasons. Meeting 3 on March 21st, topic 1 is to determine how the city of Oceanside should prioritize long-term users and new users, including how new facilities are allocated, and that will become particularly important as we look into expanding our joint use agreement with the school district, as well as the development of Parkside 1 in El Corazon, and any other future opportunities for expanding our park inventory. The second topic for March 21st is to determine if the user group classifications that were developed in the standing committee should be the baseline for the new classifications. If that's the case, we'll start working from there. If not, then we'll start at a different point. And then the last meeting on April 11th is to determine the revised user group classifications. First off, I do want to acknowledge the important work that was done very collaboratively during the standing committee workshops this fall. And we want that to be our starting point. So there was a vision statement that was developed which was to enhance and strengthen the Oceanside community by consistently serving each community member with absolute fairness and transparency. So that's a vision that we want to continue in the process of the revision. It was worked on collaboratively. Some of you, I think, were at those meetings and had input into that vision. And then the other thing that was developed were the three values, which are fairness, and this includes increasing access and adding facilities and fields. The second value was community, and the third value was transparency. So as we move forward in this process, I want to make sure that we keep a clear eye on that vision and values that were already developed. One other major point that I want to make before we get started is that we should keep in mind the ability to separate prioritization with fees. In other words, we can decide that we want to prioritize certain types of organizations and groups and into a category that we traditionally call C category, where there are no fees. But we're not beholden to that. In other words, we can put a group in category C and treat them with that level of prioritization, but acknowledge that that group is in a position to pay fees that maybe they haven't paid in the past, or maybe they were in a lower categorization, but do have the ability to continue to pay fees. So I want to keep those two elements separate, and they could be exactly the same or they could change, and that's what I want to emphasize with the group as we move forward. So in terms of today, the other thing that I wanted to cover is how we are able to increasingly use technology to address some of the problems that we've encountered in our allocation process. So one of the things that I'm really excited to share a relationship that I met Nikhil with Kaizen in like about a year and a half ago, before I joined the city of Oceanside. And what is really interesting about Kaizen is that they look at a problem and work with the city to develop a solution using technology in the most innovative way that they can, and to fit our specific needs as an organization. So we've been chatting for my time here during my time here in Oceanside about what are the possibilities that Kaizen could do, could employ, or whether it be Kaizen or any other organization that could leverage technology to address the issue of equity. And so I'm really excited to introduce Nikhil and have him talk a little bit about how technology can play into this equation. Right now, our registration and permitting software is ActiveNet. That doesn't have to be the case for moving forward, but what I want you to see is what the possibilities exist out there. And the other thing that I want you to think about as we go into this presentation that Nikhil will do is that the issue of resident versus non-resident status, that's something that has been this gray line, I think, for the city of Oceanside. And once as a group of users and community, once we come to a consensus on what that threshold should be, what defines a resident group, we can use technology to really create a more black and white line. And Nikhil will kind of show us how technology can do that. So with that being said, I'm gonna pass it on to Nikhil. If you don't mind talking to Troy, or
It's very nice to meet you all. Thank you for letting me be here, Manny, and good to see some familiar faces and meet you all. My name is Nikhil. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of Kaizen. We build program, registration, booking, and reservation software. But more holistically, we work with municipalities to use technology in new and exciting ways that may be able to help problems with things like form-based application management, registrations, bookings. And Manny asked me to come to show one potential way in which technology could be used to solve some problems around building transparency around the field allocation process. So I'm going to show you a prototype. The prototype that we put together here is a combination of some of our registration and booking tools with a little bit more of a flair for integrating with public services like IRS database, 501c3 standings, and then also using the latest and greatest in new large language models. Like if you guys have used tools like ChatGPT and how you can get information very quickly from different services that exist on the technology realm, been using some of that technology to make it a little bit easier to do things like resident grouping, categorization. So I'm going to turn your screen to this prototype that we've put together, and I'll full screen it. Are you guys all able to see the what's loading up here? Awesome. Okay, so what you're looking at would be the example of a backend dashboard if you were in your, I assume everyone here has used a registration program like ActiveNet for field allocation, those kinds of things. Imagine if you logged into your version of this and went into your account, we would have a tab for you on the left side called group classification. This would be some process that you are already all used to. You can click on what are group classifications, learn more about all the classifications you have access to, the A, the B, the C, the D, E priority classes. But I'm going to show you the revised process that we've come up with to hopefully automate some, so you know how transparent the process is with generating your own classification. In the middle section here, you have all your prior classification. This would be if we were running the system for multiple years in a row. But first, I'm going to start with clicking this big button that allows me to start the generation process. So I'm going to click Generate Classification, and then all we're going to ask is all of the same information that's normally used to generate classifications to begin with. So your organization name, and then you'll also be able to specify whether or not your organization has a registered EIN and obviously is a registered nonprofit. And the way that we're doing this is there are a bunch of APIs out there, which is a fancy way of saying there are a bunch of public databases that allow us to write a piece of code that can give an EIN to that piece of code. That piece of code can interact with the IRS database and come back with a response as to whether or not that's a valid nonprofit that's in good standing. So there's no guesswork that's going into that process. Hey, you have a valid 501c3, you have a certificate, you have an EIN, we can tell you whether or not it's a valid nonprofit. So all I'm going to do here is enter nonprofit example. I'm going to click look up, and we can use, because we work with municipalities, we can interact with this API for free. There's no cost, and it can come back to me with data about what that EIN is, the organization that it represents, and then where the organization was founded or incorporated. Additionally, I can scroll down here. We already know whether it has a designated 501c status, but in the very rare case that there may be a mismatch between the data that gets returned from the IRS database, which is we updated on a week-long resolution, the very rare case that there may be a discrepancy, we're also asking you to upload your tax exemption letter or certificate here as well. So I can come here, click up on a file that I want to upload, and upload a 501c3 letter. It's going to analyze it as well. And similarly, we can write a piece of code that's looking at that document and doing a document analysis on it. The closest thing that I'll give as an example is, have you guys ever used tools like ChatGPT to say, hey, read this document for me or summarize this website? It's very similar. We're looking at the document, looking at specific details about it, like the letterheads, the 501 status, the EIN, and coming to a conclusion about the document in a programmatic way. Then I can click next here. And then similarly, I can enter details about my roster and team. I can come here, choose my team sport. That's my team name. I can choose the team sport. I can specify the number of years that I've been a group in Oceanside or a registered league in Oceanside. And then finally, I can upload a roster. So as long as this roster is specified or built in a certain way, first name, last name, email address, and potentially your address of individual members, I can come here, upload my roster, open that up. And what's happening here is it's uploading the roster, it's analyzing the resident status. So there's a piece of code that's running that is basically looking at every entry in that Excel spreadsheet and saying, okay, resident number 1, resident number 2, oh, that third address does not fall within a specific set of geography bounds and is not going to qualify for resident status. Then it'll analyze, and then you can see a roster analysis right here that says for the test file that we uploaded, there's 16 total members. 13 out of the 16 members have Oceanside residency. And the way that we're doing this is we will work with a city like Oceanside or any municipality. They would give us a geo bound and tell us certain geographic regions where residents are considered as residents or not. And then we would check the addresses in that Excel spreadsheet to see if they match. And if this is above a certain percentage, call it 60 or 70%, then that goes into our mental calculation on the back end for what grouping is assigned to what resident status and combination. And then finally, you have your age groups. And then right when you click next, yes, sir.
Right. So one of the issues is when we say that a group is a resident versus a non-resident, there needs to be some mechanism to verify that, and we really haven't done that. That traditionally, in my experience, someone turns in rosters and game schedules and things like that, and staff go through it, and it's a very laborious process to check what that percentage is. So the value of using technology in this way is that when you enter your rosters, city staff are not reviewing this. So this information is not accessible to us. It's encrypted, and I'll let Nikhil talk a little bit more about the privacy element, because it's outside my realm of expertise. But yeah, the idea is once we decide as a collective group what is the threshold, then we need a mechanism to address that threshold so that we're not guessing or self-declaring that this is a resident group or not a resident group. So that's really the crux of the conversation today is we came up, the city of Oceanside came up with the number 70% because we looked at neighboring cities and what they were doing, and 70% made sense. Maybe 70% doesn't make sense. Maybe it should be 50% plus one. Maybe it should be 60%. So the topic of conversation today is what's the number that makes sense. Once we come to that number, we have a mechanism now that will allow us to be able to transparently say, yes, this group is a nonprofit, a bona fide nonprofit in good standing, and yes, this group is someone that has, if that threshold is 65%, then they meet that threshold, or they don't meet that threshold. Right, and I think I want to try and keep the conversation global and not specific to a particular organization. And obviously, you're kind of looking out for coastal, but one of the interesting things about schools, for example, or specifically a charter school, is that unlike some of our leagues, you actually have a brick and mortar location that's in Oceanside. And so, for example, when you look at I don't know, let's say Panera wants to have a employee recognition event at a City of Oceanside facility, and they come to us and they want to rent the facility. And I use Panera, but it should have been a local one. Mary's wants to have an event, right? They're located in Oceanside. So they come to us and they say, I would like to rent the facility. We go by the address of the brick and mortar location, not all of their guest lists, right? We don't ask them to furnish a guest list and where those folks live. So that's one of the things that we have to have a conversation about. How does a brick and mortar location, because the emphasis has been on sports groups, but this document applies to more than sports groups. It applies to our facilities, folks that want to hold a special event, for example, at the Pier Amphitheater, and are targeting residents and visitors. So, there are definitely things that we need to have a discussion about. But again, I want to be careful that we're not singling out a specific organization, understanding that you're here to represent Coastal, and want to make sure that what we end up with is fair to Coastal. Sure. And if you don't mind, let's let Nikhil finish the presentation, then we can get into a little bit more of the substance.
And then basically you would have all the information uploaded, and then to quickly address the note of privacy. So totally understand, and it's something that's really important to us. This information is only used in, and I can tell you a little bit more about where information is stored on servers, but we have the information is parsed out of the Excel spreadsheet. We can anonymize things like first name, last name to avoid violating anything around PII or personally identifiable information. We'll check the addresses, and then those documents and information is deleted off of our server. So it's only used It's only used in the real-time calculation of whether or not grouping falls in a specific classification, or if calculating that end-line percentage. We do store the percentage of those residents that are in the spreadsheet, obviously, so we can determine what classification belongs to what user group. But I can speak at length after this. If you guys also pull me aside to talk more about where information is stored, happy to share documents as well. And click submit here, and then it's going to think for a second. While it's thinking, essentially what it's doing is taking all of the parameters that you as a group, I imagine this group meets, and comes up with what those parameters are. Our job is to combine them into a logic flow that says, great, the percentage of resident status is met, additional parameters like where the location of that nonprofit is located, brick and mortar status. We call them on our end features. Each feature has a specific weight that's associated with it. So you can say, hey, being a resident counts for slightly more than having a mortar location, vice versa. That is a process that you guys co-create and come up with. You pass us those features and those weights. We don't come up with it. Our job is merely to just implement the technology according to the process you've designated. And then now you have a classification automatically assigned. There is potentially could be an appeal option. Again, this is something you guys come up with. Our goal is to build the technology around a process. Fine. Or you can click accept classification. That will tag on the classification to your account. Then you've been granted that classification group C for the course of a calendar year, or however long you want that classification. At that point, now when it passes to someone on the recreation side is behind a desk doing things like field allocation, there's a little bit less, well, I should say no guesswork that goes into actually distributing and allocating field, because now it's all done. So just kind of a quick pass at some of this stuff. I'll be here and happy to talk about how we build technology into it, but a little bit helpful. Potentially one demo how maybe.
You know what? That are watching at home can hear you.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, the software that you're talking about, so is this already something that the City of Oceanside owns? Or is this something that the city has to purchase, or like, does the cost of this fall to the all those groups?
This would be, to be clear, we do not have any agreement with the City of Oceanside. Manny and I are just, we've been chatting on the side about some of the technology that we build, and I'm just here to show one way that it could be possible. Yes, if we work with municipalities, so a municipality would be our customer, and this would be something that gets rolled into the facility management and registration software.
And they're similar to ActiveNet in terms of the process that we would engage with them. So right now we're using ActiveNet. There are several other vendors, including Kaizen, that we could be working with. But the bottom line is there are improvements in technology that have occurred that allow us to do things like that.
Oh, there we go. My question, maybe you already said this, sorry, I came in late. Are there other cities nearby that are doing the same process, Carlsbad, Encinitas? What are they doing? Or do we know?
So right now there are no cities in San Diego County that are using Kaizen. I'll let Nikhil talk a little bit about
Or
where-
anything similar to it? Like, do we know what they're doing? Is it effective? Should we, is what they're doing, do we know what their system is? And is it effective?
So some organizations in San Diego are using CivicRec. Some organizations are using ActiveNet. I want to say those are the two primary registration softwares that are being used. But
So it's a similar process, though, taking in addresses, basically the worries over here that we had, similar process and
no,
storing?
this would be, I don't know of anybody in San Diego that is currently doing that. So this is
Okay,
something that as we were talking about the issue of equity and the issue of having that resident, non-resident rate and the question of how are we confirming that groups are residents or non-residents, we started talking about what could be done in terms of technology. So in the way of logistics for us to engage with someone like Kaizen, it would take us going through an RFP process and requesting, which stands for request for proposals, from organizations like Active, like CivicRec, and identifying that our desire is to have some mechanism that will identify who is a resident and a non-resident. And if we want the value of or the feature of scrubbing the IRS website and confirming nonprofit status, that's something that would need to be included in that process.
and you may not even know this, but are other cities in San Diego County verifying status as a nonprofit? Is anybody else doing that? Do you guys even know?
So the process that most other cities do is you provide a letter of determination, but that letter of determination is valid when you apply for 501c3 status. That doesn't tell you if it's a nonprofit in good standing. So
Current.
what
It's not-
staff are supposed to do in those instances is go to the IRS website. There is actually a search function that allows you to identify which are the nonprofits that are in good standing, and then at that point treat that group as a bona
So
fide
right now it's
nonprofit.
being manually done. And so we're kind of reinventing the wheel with his technology to just make it easier to find out if they're still in good standing. Is that what?
No, the IRS website requires you to input the EIN and the organization name and to go through the list and find it. This program would do it for us. So you as the organization would enter your EIN,
Yeah.
and the software would tell us that you are a nonprofit in good standing without having to find it on the IRS webpage.
Okay. But we're the only city that might be using this technology. Everyone else pretty much does it manually.
Right.
Okay. But is it working for other cities, like without having to list, personal addresses? Are there other cities in San Diego that are successful at not, taking in information like that to see if most of the team is what their residency percentage is?
I would say, no, they're not successful. In my
Okay.
experience, what that process looks like is you have to submit your rosters to me, and I retain those rosters and review them as staff, and then determine whether you're a resident group or a non-resident group. So that means that what Nikhil just talked about, where staff don't have access to private addresses, that actually is happening
So it's
in other
eliminating
organizations.
a
So
human having the access to
so
it.
there is
Okay.
this would take away the human element and provide additional security. It also takes away the possibility of error because a lot of in my previous organizations, the way it was done is you counted, right? And a lot of times it was not an electronic spreadsheet. It was here are the rosters in physical form, and I'm going to count how many are in the city or not.
Yeah,
The
okay.
the other piece about this is that this technology would geofence Oceanside. So I can take a roster on a spreadsheet and change my address from San Diego to say Oceanside. And if I'm looking at it as a person and counting as staff, I'm counting it as Oceanside, but the system would scrub the actual address and determine, wait, that's not an Oceanside address, and be able to give us an accurate representation of resident versus non-resident. So again,
Okay.
this is creating a system that would ensure transparency. And so when we're dealing with issues of equity and questions about are we serving Oceanside residents or not, we would be able to confidently say yes or no. But again, the process that we're going through now is to determine what is that level of service and who are we intending to serve. So this type of tool exists to kind of ensure that we fit those parameters and that we meet those parameters.
I have a question. So,
Right.
I think it says mic on. Is there, does the city have the will, the budget, to adopt such a system? You know, I mean, is this like a possibility that could actually happen? Because I think it could save a lot of time and, you know, issues that, you know, people might claim, oh, they got this, they got that. It makes it more, you know, so that it's like available for people to see what's actually happening. So that transparency piece. But I'm just wondering if that's actually like,
So the RFP process would take us through evaluating what organizations would essentially be willing to do for a price, and we would look at what we're currently paying for ActiveNet and compare that to those bids and enter into that kind of process before we went down a certain path. So the conversations that we've had with Kaizen and other organizations, you know, they're pretty comparable in terms of pricing. So we're not discussing technology that's outside the realm of something that could happen in Oceanside.
and then do you take into consideration all the human effort that would go into hand doing, you know, whatever this can do, somebody is doing by hand.
Exactly. So one of the things that I find attractive to using technology is creating efficiencies and just making things easier for staff so that they can focus on more important tasks than perhaps an administrative function that can be done by automation. Any other questions for Nikhil before? Thank you.
So much. Great day.
Okay, so what I wanted to mention as we move on to talking about sports councils is my vision of how these meetings will go is that we'll have a discussion about the two topics, and then you'll have an opportunity to go back and talk with your organization, the folks that you represent, and then at the beginning of the next meeting, we'll get your feedback in terms of where we want to go for these two topics that we discussed today. I mentioned this on the December 21st meeting, but the idea here is there's going to be a little bit of homework, so I'm working on a mechanism to provide you access to a number of field allocation documents for other cities. Some of them are neighboring cities. Some of them are just good examples of how those organizations have dealt with different processes and or challenges to develop their process. So I want to say there's about 15 cities that all provide their allocation documents. Some are really good, some are not so good. And so my hope is that you can take a quick look and that we can come up with something that's specific to Oceanside that works for this community and these users. But that's kind of the plan for today is, and I mentioned this at the December 21st meeting, but this is not a noticed meeting, so we don't follow Robert's Rules of Order. I think you guys have already recognized that if you have a question or a comment, we just raise your hand and let's have a dialogue. That's the intent of today. So when we talk about the development of an athletic federation or sports council, it's to talk about what we think it should look like, what are some of the issues. So I wanted to start off by saying that, as some of you are aware, there is actually in the city of Oceanside fee schedule a fee to be a member of the athletic federation, and that fee is $100 per year. That fee structure or that fee, what that fee means, that can change. But I wanted to call your attention to the fact that that does exist and we do have an athletic federation. So of the neighboring cities, there are some that have a sports council, and ours is an athletic federation. In my experience, most people refer to it as sports council. I'm going to use that term interchangeably. We can call it whatever the community wants, but the idea is bringing together the group of users that utilize our facilities and our resources. But the cities that have a sports council are Encinitas, Poway, San Marcos, and Vista. Those are the neighboring cities. Carlsbad, for example, does not have a sports council. There are some organizations that put the allocation process in the hands of the sports council. So when I was with the city of Chula Vista, we had a sports council that met, and they determined as a group collectively which organizations were going to have what fields, and then turned that over to the city. And our job as staff was then to produce permits based on the allocation that was determined by the groups. These were horrific meetings, as you can probably imagine. And it was great for staff. We loved it because, we didn't have to make that decision. The group made that decision. I don't recommend going down that path. Chula Vista has abandoned that process. It has a lot of problems. But that is certainly something that is potentially done. What I see in most other cities is really a sports council being a mechanism for collaboration. And I saw that in our first meeting, December 21st, where I felt like there was two-way dialogue between us. And I know individually as organizations, you have an opportunity to have really good dialogue with Daniela and CJ in our department and work very well with them. But I think bringing the group together and for you to hear the issues that other organizations face as a group is important, and there's value to that. And for us to kind of have discussions and see the use of our amenities in Oceanside on a more global level, I think is important. That being said, you as our users could say, you know what, we don't want that sports council. We want to go in a different direction. So that's the purpose of this conversation today. And I want to be clear that the dialogue that we had can happen outside the context of an athletic federation or a sports council. So if the community decides that we don't want to have something where you have to be a member and pay a fee in order to have a coming together, a gathering of groups and have dialogue, fine, we can have that as just a dialogue. It's not necessary to go down that path. So the value that we discussed on December 21st of having a sports council or an athletic federation that has a membership fee is that that starts to put money into a revenue account that can be used in a way that the group decides. And that's what we had in Chula Vista was you had to pay a membership fee to be on the sports council, and that money accumulated and was spent in a way that was decided by the sports council. So that is a model that we could adopt. As I mentioned earlier, the membership fee is currently $100. That means that a group with 12 people is paying the same as a group with 3,000 people. So that's another topic conversation is the fee something that should be tied to an individual as opposed, or the number of participants, I should say, as opposed to, the organization as a whole. And I mentioned at the December 21st meeting that the city of San Diego started what they called an equity fee and started charging $1 per participant in each organization. So if you had, say, for example, a Little League with 500 kids that registered, your fee, your equity fee was $500. That money goes into an account that then is used to ensure equity because there are demographic inequities in San Diego, and they've used that to kind of ensure that regardless of where you live, the park system is providing the same level of service. So I see that as a potential value for Oceanside is to have revenue that the group can decide. Do we want to put some money into bringing one of the fields that is having issue to greater enhanced level of maintenance, so on and so forth. So another thing that I want us to consider as we're talking about a sports council is who can be a member. Is it just anybody who wants to join joins, and what are the perks? So do they have voting membership? And what I want to be cautious about is the concept of pay to play. And so does having a sports council where you have to be a member and pay fees then preclude some folks from having access to the process? So again, a topic for discussion as we move forward. And then lastly, what I want you to consider is what might be the benefits of membership of the sports council, because if you're having some organizations that are paying into this membership fee, and then you have others that are not, there should be some benefits to joining, right? And so some organizations that I've seen in the allocation process will do an allocation amongst members of the sports council, and then what's left gets opened up to the rest of the group. And that's kind of the benefit of being a member is if you want kind of first dibs at all of the amenities that you're joining the sports council. So those are the things that I wanted to open with in terms of this. And I know I was asked to produce a pros and cons, and I'll still produce something that I send out, but I wanted us to have kind of an organic conversation. So with that, I'll open the floor to any thoughts on a sports council. And if you don't mind, when you speak, if you don't mind introducing yourself and what organization you represent. As I mentioned, this is being recorded and available via Zoom.
My name is Martine Franck. Oh, sorry.
Martine, is your mic on?
Yeah,
Oh,
it says it's on.
if it's
Okay,
green,
I'll try to
okay.
get- So I'm from Melba Bishop Pickleball. And I'm wondering if one already exists, the Oceanside Athletic Federation. Well, I don't know that any of us have heard about it. I have never heard of it. And what is it currently doing, and what is What is the purpose of it?
Sure. So the Athletic Federation does exist. There is a fee. The Athletic Federation hasn't met in a few years. The process of meeting, stopping the meetings coincided with COVID, but it also was a reflection of a couple of things. One, there was this fee that was attached to being a member, and there really wasn't an understanding of what that money paid for or went to. And so it just kind of went into the general fund. That doesn't have to happen. So that fee exists. We can put it into an enterprise account, for lack of a better term, and have it being used for the purposes of the Athletic Federation. The fee schedule doesn't ascribe that this go to the general fund, but that was one of the reasons. Was this, there's this fee and it doesn't make sense. And then the other reason is my understanding, the dialogue that was intended to happen wasn't necessarily necessary, because there were good lines of communication between individual organizations and Daniela or CJ. So that's my understanding of why the organization stopped meeting. I see value to having the group together, so that when there are questions about the allocation, we can talk about them like we did on December 21st. And then Glenn.
Hi, Glenn from Coastal Academy. So one, I like the idea of a federation of some sort. I think we discussed in the meeting on the 21st that being able to come together, to provide input, talk amongst one another, and it wasn't so standoffish where everybody's kind of fighting for their train. So I think it has value. I would not recommend that we do all of the allocations, but I think there is value for that group to provide input to you and Danielle and CJ as a whole. And I would recommend that, if possible, right, probably if whatever the fees that come up, right? So some groups are bigger than others, but yeah, I think it makes sense to do it on a kind of a per athlete or a per person basis. Makes most sense to me.
I think maybe
do you mind
my name is
introducing yourself?
Dmitry Demidov. I'm with Tri-City Inline Hockey League. I think that maybe there's confusion between Athletic Federation and the Sports Council. They're not one and the same thing. And in the case of Athletic Federation, it is not as if we would be coming and discussing something and making decisions. This is Athletic Federation organization that does different things, right? Just to clarify that.
So I'm using the term Athletic Federation and Sports Council interchangeably, because it just so happens that in Oceanside, we called our group the Athletic Federation, and that is what is in the fee schedule that City Council approves. So the current fee is for membership in the Athletic Federation. If we wanted to call it the Oceanside Sports Council, we could do that. But the purpose is the same. The purpose is to bring all of the users together and to create a venue where dialogue can happen, collaboration can happen, explanation of policies and frankly recommendations from all of you folks that are in the parks.
Well, thanks for explaining that, Manuel. But now I will offer my opinion on that, because why muddy the waters? In my opinion, it will bring little value if we were to gather here on a regular basis and discuss things and then contribute to some decision-making here. But I think the way the Sports Department of Parks and Rec is doing their job for years now is good enough. They make determination and then assign classifications, A, B, and C currently, or there's a new one being in the works by the Sports Commission here. Whichever way, they're doing that determination, and they notify the involved organizations accordingly, whether this is going to be manually counting the number of residents or via API or ChatGPT kind of a connected program. It doesn't matter as long as that determination is made according to the classifications. To me, everything has been working smoothly and oiled very well. I have been continuously giving compliments to Daniela, to CJ Palmer, and why muddy the waters?
Understood. Thank you.
So I'd just like to add that I think it's a great point, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I think that the software that we just learned about could actually solve a lot of those kinds of problems, and there may not even be a need for this kind of a conversation.
Exactly.
How-
Our time is valuable too, so if it's working well, classifications are given according to the rules that are acceptable by the majority of the organizations involved. And that's what this discussion, I assume, is for. Then let's just not meet all the time and make these decisions. Let the employees of sports department of Parks and Rec do their job.
However,
What's the
I-
organization you're with?
Tri-City Inline Hockey League. We just celebrated our 30th year here in Oceanside.
But I do think that there's value in getting, this kind of information, or like last time when we were here, when Daniela went over all the parks and what facilities they have. I think that that's valuable. I don't know that it's necessarily needed to happen every single month, but I do think that there is value in meeting sometime.
And that's a good point with respect to the recurrence of meetings. So there are some organizations where a sports council meets monthly. That to me, in my mind, the sports council would meet when the fields are allocated. So if as a group you decide, what's working now with the 2 allocations is where we want to go, I would see the sports council meeting twice a year, once in the spring and once in the for the spring allocation, once for the winter allocation.
It's on.
Oh, there we go. Hello, my name's Jackie Contos. I represent NCDA, that's North County Derby Alliance. So I really like hearing your input. I'm sorry, I forgot your name already.
Dimitri.
Dimitri. I really like hearing Dimitri's input. This is a group that's been here for 30 years and it's worked well. But I also I'm new to our organization I've been here for a year, and it's been very interesting to see basically a minority group in sports. And, we're roller derby, we're kind of a new group, and I've seen their struggles of trying to get rink time and what that looks like for them. And, and I see it as this beautiful, beautiful thing, these women in their 50s playing a contact sport and all the health benefits and everything that come with that. And so I think, there's got to be other minority groups out there that are maybe trying to break into a field or a space that you can't get into, which also I think our last meeting, we talked about how can we, I think sports traditionally stay the same. We have baseball, football, but these, I don't know what you would call them, different sports that are coming up, maybe it's good for us to meet, I think, maybe once in a while to see, what is the new sport out there? Is field hockey a new thing? Does field hockey need a place to play? And how can we accommodate that? How can we maybe change up some old space that's not, some dead space that's not being used, and change it? And anyway, so I like the idea of meeting at least once in a while. I like the idea of checking the background to see who is actually local to the area. just so we don't, just to eliminate, arguments of like, no, we have more clout here. I also like the idea of for the fee, the $100 fee, which is not a lot. That's roughly like $2 a week. So I think any organization could come up with that. But I think you were talking about saying yes to, if you have more people, pay more for your fee, as long as that gives that organization that maybe is a large organization, gives them more clout in deciding where the funds, especially that they have donated, putting those funds back to use for them, like in their field, so if they're putting a lot of money in, they should have maybe the right to have a better field and better facility. Anyway, that's all I want to say.
That's a really good point about balancing the amount of investment that you have with the amount of output. One thing I will mention is a larger organization takes up a larger portion of assets. So sometimes when they're putting in a little bit more money, and that allows for some of our smaller parks to come up in terms of their functionality, then the issue of wanting that bigger space is reduced. And so there's value to that bigger organization as well. So it could go either way, but the purpose here is to have a discussion. And Glenn, you had a point.
Yeah, and so Dimitri, I get what you're saying. I think Danielle and CJ have done, like I said, I don't want to bash anybody, but since they've come on, it's been great. But I think the Federation or Sports Council, not just scheduling, I think bringing up other issues, maybe it's, kind of the transient population or graffiti or facilities that are, run down or need whatever. Again, maybe not every month, maybe it's a couple times a year, but I think having that venue that we could all come together and talk is worthwhile. And, if we get multiple groups that have the same types of problems, then that's where, Parks and Rec and then the city can do more. So I think it's a good opportunity. It's a good avenue for, talking about things like that, not just in the scheduling realm.
So you're suggesting that perhaps we could, if the organizations in Oceanside were to pursue an athletic federation, then its role and function would have to be defined very clearly, and it cannot be ambiguous or just blurry. Earlier today, I needed to know who to contact within the city of Oceanside for repairing the lights at our rink, and I got the name, Nathan Mertz, his telephone number and everything. So I don't need to meet about that, And if the meetings are not going to be about the scheduling, because Daniela and CJ Palmer are going to be using this wonderful software from Mr. Reddy to without the human element to determine allocation according to the classifications that are clearly defined, then what are we going to be doing over here every so often at the Athletic Federation? It just might be opening a can of worms if we were to hold these meetings, because if classifications are defined solidly by the Sports Commission, whether the current one or the new one they're working on, and there is no gray area of misinterpretation of those criteria, then if the Athletic Federation meets and bans it for, let's say, a new organizations that would like to have more visibility or anything else, but that's not in line with those classifications, then again, this could be opening a can of worms.
Okay, so I want to correct one thing. So
Yeah.
you said the classifications that are being worked on, you are working on the classifications. Just to be clear, this venue is now the process to change that.
Okay, it's no longer the Sports Commission then, Manuel?
It's the standing committee took us to a certain level, and now we're going to take it to the finish line.
Yeah.
So we're meeting 4 times. And one of the things I want to stress is I identified some topics that I felt we needed to have a new facility rental packet. If the group decides that there are additional elements that need to be considered and we need to add an additional meeting, that's within the purview of this group. But But this is the group that's going to do that. Now, I understand that your organization right now is happy with the amount of space that you have. And so I think some of the things that Glenn was alluding to is let's say that the condition of the surfacing on the roller rink is getting to a point where it's causing a problem for your organization, right? And so yes, you could call us and have that one-way conversation, or we could be as a group discussing what are the issues with our amenities, because as we know, the city of Oceanside has a finite amount of resources, and resurfacing different play areas is we don't have enough money to resurface everything every year when when we'd like to. So decisions have to be made. So this offers a venue for you to have that conversation. You use that same amenity, and so bringing two voices from different organizations, I think that's what we saw was potentially valuable. I completely get the issue of time and not wanting to have meaningless meetings. Believe me, I have a 1 hour commute home. I would rather not come out on an additional evening to sit down and talk. But I do think it's important for us to consider, and if there's value, to think about whether there is an opportunity to do things better. And I'm not, I think you said things are working well for your organization, and I think that for the vast majority of the organizations that we have, things are working well. But there are some organizations that have been marginalized or feel that they've been marginalized. And so our responsibility is to make sure that everybody who is trying to get fields, trying to get access to a rink, trying to get access to our courts, that there is a process that they can look to, that we can say is equitable.
Yeah, I understand I might be in a minority here, given compliments continuously to the current sports department, Parks and Rec. But for the record, the rink surface was resurfaced earlier this summer without having to attend any meetings.
Junior with the Oceanside American Little League. Dimitri, you said your organization has been there 30 years. Is there another organization trying to fight or get into your ring area?
No, well, continuously there have been continuously the Derby Girls and the hockey league, roller hockey league, have been there for a long, long time. There is, however, another organization, Field Hockey, that was renting the facility from time to time, and they don't need much time. So as far as I know, that I haven't heard any unhappy feedback from the field hockey organization. There was a soccer team that was renting the facility when the grass fields were closed due to rain, but they stopped renting it after we reported that their soccer balls were damaging the nets.
My organization has been there 70 years last year, so we're working on our 71st year. It's year-round baseball there, so we really don't have any issues with the process either. The city's been great. They respect us. We respect them. It's more, I think that it's safe to say that you are coming up with this federation stuff because there is other organizations that are continuously bothering or complaining to the city. Am I correct?
There are increasingly organizations that feel like they're not getting fields, and that's a problem that is going to get bigger and bigger because our inventory is not increasing, and the number of for-profit organizations, the number of travel clubs, that continues to increase dramatically. And there's a few things that are leading to that. One of them being now increasingly CIF, the restriction of participating on club teams during your season has been lifted. And so we're seeing more club teams having a need throughout the year. So that's gonna continue to grow. We want to be in a position where we have a mechanism to address that, and so that when this growth happens, we're able to respond in a way that makes sense for Oceanside.
So it's not hard at all for some organization to just say, we want to put together a pickleball tournament, and they land on Oceanside's courts because we have more than most other cities, and just run a big tournament. And so there has to be a way to control that. And I think I can see that happening with any team, any facility. Somebody comes in and says, oh, we want to run a big soccer tournament, or we want to run a big baseball tournament. And it can be very hard to control that. So I think that the federation or whatever could possibly have a value in that way.
Another question for you, Manny. In Chula Vista, when you had this over there, how long was it running? How long were they collecting money? And what was the average balance? And how often was it come to a group meeting to vote on to see if it'll get approved? And another comment with that is, if the deeper the pocket, the more pull you have with that is a problem that I would have as well, because not every organization is going to have like the soccer fields do at the El Corazon, where, you know, they're essentially bullying that area because they're going to have more money because more registered players are coming in, versus football season where an organization only has an eighth of the registers. So they're just going to continuously push away the football from using soccer fields.
Yeah, I think I'm not really familiar with groups that would create a weighted value to their membership. In my experience, it's more of a democratic process. So the majority of groups that are in the organization need to decide how that money is spent. In Chula Vista, primarily, it was spent on overseeding, maybe laser leveling ball fields, things that were outside of the scope of what the Parks and Recreation Department could do, but were needed to have better fields or gyms or things like that. So, obviously the group, if we go in that direction, the group would have to decide how those funds are expended, and how much money is there would be determined by the fee, right? If you're collecting $100 a season, or excuse me, a year per organization, that's not good. It's going to take you a couple of years to be able to pay for fertilizer for one field. You collect a little bit more, you'll have a little bit more discretion in terms of what you can do. But I think the group would have to decide, do we want to address short-term problems? Do we want to save some of that money and address, put some money towards lighting a field? Do we want to do something major at a field? But that's where the group would have to come together and decide, this is where we want to put it.
Hi, Manny. Chris from Oceanside Valley Little League. Hi, neighbor. I don't think we've ever met, but I see you guys are there all the time. Just speaking in regards to this conference, I know that we did have one at one time when I first started as president. I know that we did pay into it, and then pandemic happened, and then it just kind of fell apart. Do we know, were there any funds that were in that during that time that it was around? And if so, what happened to those funds, or would those be reallocated into this group if we decided to do that?
Those funds are general fund fees. They went into the general fund, just like, for example, a permit fee goes in. And I think my understanding is that was part of the frustration, is that there's this additional fee that we're having to pay. And, there's no value to it. So why are we doing this? And I commend Danielle and CJ for recognizing that and saying, okay, is there really value to how this organization is functioning right now? Let's move away from it and save some of the sports leagues a little bit of, I mean, it's not a lot, but it's a little bit of money. So I think, circumstances change and we can revisit that, or like I said, this could be a group that doesn't have that element of funding and could be that Dimitri, it doesn't make sense for you to attend the meeting, so you don't, but the rest of the group, the organizations that want to come together, they do. Up to you, really up to you.
I think, I'm sorry. I think the biggest obstacle for us, and probably similar with Junior has, is we have a board that we report to. So for me to go back and present this, I mean, a lot of our board members would probably want to see a return on investment. What are we paying this money? What is it going to accomplish? Who's going to attend these meetings? For us, we're all volunteers, 100%. We don't get paid to do this. So, our time is valuable. And most of it we'd like to be spending with our programs versus attending a lot of meetings. We already do that enough with districts. So I like the idea. I think that would help for especially pickleball. I don't see you guys over there, so maybe this could be, one of those areas where we could have conversations if there were issues with the groups or things that we wanted to work out. So I do see some positives with it. Absolutely.
If we make this federation committee together and Dimitri seems like he's out the door, whether you like it or not, he has probably no say into it, doesn't want it, right? And we come together and say, hey, you know what, Manny, we would like to give her organization more permitting time on his skate ring play area. Is that how that would work?
So we're working on a document that's going to guide how we do the allocation. Staff still does the allocation. I would see it more as an advisory group, much like our Parks and Recreation Commission, but more on a sports emphasis. And so
So then
your
he's-
recommendation could be, hey, why are you guys not giving other groups access to that?
So he's got a point
resource?
to where he's, we're wasting our time in a sense if it's still going to be going through you guys, right?
You're saying that the value that you see is just in being able to,
Meaning if again, let's just say hypothetically, he doesn't join this at all and he it's been working great for him, but she's asking for more time. What he's saying and what you're saying is you're going to make the decision at the end of the day, regardless, as a city.
the document that we put together in this group will guide us in that decision-making process. So one of the things that we'll talk about in one of the future meetings is the role of longevity. So, things like if I've been at the park for 70 years, do I have first rights to this amenity? How does a new group come in and what right do they have? What I see the Sports Council or the Federation being more about, how do we work together? What we talked about last meeting was taking ownership or responsibility, I should say, of our amenities and how do we provide that enhanced maintenance, whether it's through sweat equity or whether it's through additional funding that can take our fields so that they're a little bit better than what the general fund can support.
There we go. I feel like maybe we're talking about two different things. Were you talking about were you referring to maybe if we had a long-standing group meeting that's meeting? Because from what I understand, we were just meeting to basically lay out the rules of who can and can't use the fields, how's the money getting allocated. We're just going to meet a few times only, right? And then what were you talking about? Like, were you referring to maybe if we're meeting every once in a while, like later on down the road after this, the sports council or the sports council document is put together? Is that what you're meaning?
I'm just asking all broad questions
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we still don't know. In our organizations, we have bylaws, right? And
Yeah.
and we meet monthly for sure, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
just that process. So if we meet quarterly, well, you know, you could only do, or you have to wait for that quarter meeting to bring up stuff, you know, so I could see the laser, laser in the fields for sure, or new grass, new sod, minor stuff. I can definitely see that because $100 a year, you're right. I mean, how many organizations do we have that are going to want to participate into that? If the group decides no fee, then at least it's still a way to communicate. But I'm just asking all these questions because it's unclear.
Yeah, I know. Because I was getting what you're saying. Like, if let's make our rules, make our laws, we all agree to this. But I do think there should be some fee put in because we don't just want anybody to come off the street and mess with something that we're using. It's nice to put money in from our organization and we have a voice in this document. But then later on down the road, I don't even know I think that's like a separate thing we're talking about is if we're meeting after the fact, after this document is put together. And especially for someone like in my situation, being a minority, I would want just the rules, like you're saying, I would just like once laid out, because I think minority groups aren't trying to take away from anyone who's existing. We're just trying to like add, how can we like reconfigure and add more space for other places? Like, for instance, we don't even need their rink. We just need a flat surface that is cement and smooth, like it could be anything. So I think that would be nice maybe if we had some, I don't even think we would need meetings necessarily, maybe an annual meeting, semi-annual, to discuss maybe who are the new groups, how many new groups are there, or maybe that's just something that has to happen with one of you guys as an employee. How can we take something, have a voice and taking something that's like stagnant space and maybe reinvent it for maybe a new sport that's coming up, just so we're not taking away from anybody, but just reallocating a dead space.
I think I'm with you very much. Our focus should be more on finalizing the classification document with the classes A, B, C, and whatever. That's how the current one is. Work on the new one, and as long as your organization is represented in that document, you can see yourself clearly in that classification, you're comfortable enough. That will be our goal, to finalize it. My organization is very well represented according to the old classifications and the new ones. So I'm comfortable and quite relaxed, but I see that the Derby girls, they're underrepresented in those classifications. And the Coastal Academy is completely non-existent in the draft, at least, right? Everybody knows that. So these concerns are fairly understood. I'm not completely disinterested. I'm here in person today, as I was in other meetings, to hear other organizations' concerns. But yes, let us set up our priorities here. The priorities should be this solid document that is not subject to any interpretation other than it's clearly in black ink.
Okay, so unless anybody has any burning thoughts on this, I think I have enough to prepare for specific questions that I'll ask at the beginning of next meeting, and you'll have some anticipation about what those are, so that you can get feedback from your boards. But that was the question that was being asked: is do we want to go down this route or not? There's definitely two alternatives, and well, there's many alternatives, but it helps to know where all of you stand. Before I move on, I know we have a couple people in the audience. Is there that wants to comment? Okay, so the next topic for today is to talk about resident rate versus non-resident rate. So the existing facility rental packet that was ratified by or approved by City Council back in 2010 talks about resident and non-resident, but it does not define what that is. And so we got to a point where staff had to make a determination what defines a resident versus a non-resident group. And so the way that staff went about that was we looked at how other cities in the area were treating resident versus non-resident and how they were defining them. And so Carlsbad sets their rate at 70%. Encinitas sets theirs at 70%. Poway is at 51%. San Marcos is at 70%. And Vista is at 70%. So that's how we came to the conclusion that 70% made sense to the city of Oceanside. And we've been using that, but it's outside the boundaries of the existing document and really required staff to come up with a solution to address that problem. So what I would like is for this group to talk about what that rate should be. Nikhil shared that there is a mechanism to make sure that once we set that we actually can fulfill it. At this point, we have our groups that have a classification assignment, but we don't verify that on a regular basis. My understanding is that if there's a concern, we might take a look at it, but we just don't have the staffing to go through 500 people's roster and identify whether it's a resident or a non-resident that we're dealing with. I did want to bring a couple of thoughts to your attention before we start the discussion. First off, there are some nationally chartered organizations that have boundaries set outside the context of their organization. So they don't have the ability to define their boundary. And these are multi-jurisdictional. So for example, there are little leagues that are required, their boundary includes Oceanside and Vista. And there's no choice. If you live in Oceanside or if you live in Vista, you have to participate in this group. And so we have to be conscious about that reality because a group might have 35% Oceanside and 65% Vista, but they have no control over that. So I want you to think about that as we talk about this. The other thing is that I wanted to mention is there are some organizations, some cities that address lower non-resident rates, or excuse me, lower resident rates by charging a higher fee of the non-resident. So let's say your permit fee is $100 if you're a resident, but you're at 45% non-resident. So maybe your fee is $145 instead of $100. So some agencies have partially given a resident discount. That's an option we could look at. Another aspect that I wanted you to consider is the role of competitive clubs. So one thing that I want to mention is as there is an explosion of travel and competitive teams, the level of play that gets to the high school level, so our Oceanside High School, our El Camino, our Coastal, is impacted by those travel clubs. And when you look at other high schools that have travel teams and club teams that feed into that high school, so the parity of competition sometimes is swayed pretty dramatically by what feeds into that high school. And so as we think about this community and where Oceanside fits in terms of sports, because we all take pride when our high school does well in a particular sport. But there is a process that gets the development at a lower level to get to that higher level. And typically, as I'm sure you're aware, when we're talking about travel teams, when we're talking about club teams, they draw regionally. There's not a lot of clubs that are competitive at that level and have a very small geographic area. So I want you to think about that, because again, it's one piece of the puzzle that gets us to what makes sense for Oceanside. And the last thing that I wanted you to think about, I already mentioned with CIF, some of the legal challenges that have made playing the sport in season. So it used to be that if it was baseball season in high school, I could not play club baseball, and that's kind of going away. And so that process is changing the dynamic of need, and will continue to change that. So the amount of for-profit organizations, whether it be a club or a clinic or a strength coach, or all these pieces where there's monetary opportunity that needs space, is going to continue to increase. And so as we think about this resident and non-resident, keep that in mind as well. So with that, I will open to the floor for comments, questions, concerns.
So for Melba Bishop Pickleball, we have about 250 members of our association, and 60% are Oceanside residents. But that's 40% of our members are willing to pay $100 a year to be part of that association, because they have a nice place to play. They know that we give back to the community by either how we manage the courts, or money that might be donated, or how we maintain the nets, or whatever it is. And so 70% might be a little high. But I also think of it like this, that a good percentage of the people like our facilities so much that they're willing to pay to be part of that. And I'd hate to not be able to include them.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Yeah, so my thought is, having the anchor, and how do we define it, right? Having an anchor within Oceanside, like, those, and I'm familiar, I've helped coach at Oceanside Valley. And it's Oceanside Valley, it's Oceanside National, it's Oceanside American. Maybe they don't live there or whatever, but they've got a fixed anchor, within the city. And then their boundaries, right, are not defined by them. They're defined, by their, organization. So, and then also, like I said, I mean, from my perspective, Coastal Academy High School, we're putting in a new campus. Our TK38's been here since 2003. We provide, for our lottery, that we have students come in, we give priority Oceanside residents. So, I mean, from my perspective, having that fixed firm anchor within the city, I would say probably Oceanside Pop Warner is another group that kind of fits in there. That's what I would, look back on when doing this, but I would say it would have to be at least 50% Oceanside residents to kind of meet that threshold, with, that anchor is what I would recommend.
Yeah, our boundaries definitely creep over the city of Carlsbad. The Carlsbad does have a baseball organization out there called Pony. So a lot of those residents choose to go closer and not have to travel for practice, twice, 3 times a week, including game time. So to me, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head with the you know, Oceanside residents, and our boundaries do extend over to Camp Pendleton as well. So yeah, I can definitely see the pickleball and Glenn's numbers on that, because Glenn, you know, with what they do over there, and the coaching does bring into back to the community of Oceanside as well. Yeah.
The other thing too is that, for us, where some of our boundaries, we are kind of stuck to those boundaries per Little League International. However, there are leagues where we do waivers. Bonsall, Fallbrook has certain groups that they don't provide a program within their program for them. Those would be pushed onto us. The other new thing that's going to be coming out in 2025 is that Little League is no longer going to require boundaries for kids that are 7 and under, which we do also have. We all the way up from 3 years old all the way up, where they won't require boundaries. So those floodgates may open, you know, wide open for us. So that may be another issue where 70% I think is a little high, and we may need to reevaluate that. And so.
To speak on behalf of Wolfpack, I was part of that organization. And what that organization and program does is they meet in Lake Park, and, you know, they're literally across the street is now considered Vista. So his organization brings in, you know, all the way from 8-year-olds, and all the way up to high school, 16, 17-year-olds. And what his organization does is definitely bring in good quality softball players to El Camino, Oceanside High School, Tri-City, and Coastal. So his percentage, you know, could be very, very low as far as Oceanside residents, because his location is definitely right borderline with Vista.
I guess an update from our organization too, over 70% Oceanside residents, and then Vista and Carlsbad, thus is the name of our organization, Tri-City Inline Hockey League. And the children that are served are 5 through 18.
Any other thoughts? I mean, I want to be, part of the reason that I wanted Nikhil to come and talk was so that as we're talking about that number, that we understand that once we set it, there's a way to really be accurate about how we check it. Because the sense that I got was, as we were going through the standing committee meeting, is that maybe we didn't really know what our own organization's rate of residency was. So I want to be cautious that we don't enter into you know, a threshold that is 70%, and then it turns out, well, we can't meet that threshold. The other thing that I wanted to throw out there is we could, I mentioned this at the beginning, we can separate prioritization with fees, right? And we could treat prioritization with a lower residency rate and fees separately, so that when you have an organization that is predominantly Oceanside, but heavily from Vista or Carlsbad or San Marcos, that the city of Oceanside residents are not subsidizing Vista residents or San Marcos residents or Carlsbad residents. And I think that's one of the, philosophically, that's one of the issues about a resident versus non-resident rate is that, you know, when we talk about category C and there are no fees, that ultimately the taxpayers in Oceanside are subsidizing that access. And is it appropriate for that access to be subsidized for people that don't live here? So, and don't pay taxes to Oceanside. Conversely, you look at, for example, the city of Vista that requires 90% of their participants to be residents in order to receive that benefit. So just a topic for conversation, but I really want us to get to a point where we're comfortable with that number. So that if we have a good technology tool to verify it, that we're comfortable with what that tool spits out.
So I like what you just said, separating the priority from the fees, because I think, that's where, depending if whatever that threshold is, if you're not meeting it, then that bumps you down 2 or 3 spots, then bang, you lose any type of priority on scheduling. That would be huge. But yeah, I agree with you too, that, yeah, we don't want to be subsidizing another city's residents for whatever reason when they're coming in. So I do think that's a great idea to separate fees from priority and scheduling.
Any other thoughts? Do we have any comments from the audience?
I have one.
Oh, go ahead, Martine.
Well, how about if we just start with 60%? If 70 seems too high and 50 is not high enough, why don't we just see how 60 works out?
So to clarify the process, what we will do is I'll put together somewhat of a survey that we'll respond to at the beginning of the next meeting to address these 2 issues. So you have time to go back to your organizations and kind of talk about where do we feel comfortable landing that 50% plus 1, is it 51, is it 60, is it 70, whatever the case may be, and come prepared to give that feedback. I assume some folks will watch the recording or are watching on Zoom, and we'll be able to give that feedback as well. And then we'll land somewhere that makes sense for Oceanside. That being said, the next step, we'll have these meetings and we'll finish a document that then has to go to the standing committee, then to the Parks and Rec Commission, and finally to City Council. So once that is approved, then we'll have a new document. I would hate to do let's see how it works and have to do this continually. The document should be revised continually, but not maybe every year. We want to get to a place where we're comfortable with the document, and then addressing it maybe every 5 years or something like that. But I want us to make a very educated, what works for your organization decision.
I'm for meeting every 5 years. That's good.
One last comment. Yeah. So again, I think there needs to be that threshold, right? So that's got to be in there. But also think, and if you look big picture, right? If an organization is providing a good product and that's drawing in kids or other athletes or, other participants from other cities, then we don't want to punish that group for doing a good job. Because I think at the end of the day, we want folks to come here, and we don't want our kids or our athletes or participants going somewhere else. We don't want them going to Carlsbad or Temecula or wherever else they're going now. So, I mean, that doesn't get us to whatever figure that may be, but whatever figure that is, it's got to be, a good threshold, so you can make that determination, but also that if a group is doing good, that they're not punished if they get an influx of, folks from outside of Oceanside.
I did also want to mention that's a really good point. As an organization, you need to have stability and know that you're going to have an amenity for the upcoming season as you're thinking about doing registration. So I think the idea of prioritizing separately from how we charge might help to create a system where organizations know that they have that field. The trick will be, how do we address organizations that feel that they've been marginalized and organizations that are new and coming forward, and how does that fit into the puzzle? But the other option that I certainly didn't mention is some organizations don't even have non-resident. It's just a user group. Again, that plays to the issue of, are you really wanting to subsidize? Are you really wanting to prioritize organizations that serve people that don't live in your city, don't pay taxes to your organization that ultimately supports the amenities?
I was thinking when we say, you know, minority groups that feel like they've been marginalized, I almost want to reword that and say up and coming groups that want to grow, and like, how do we help them grow without taking away from existing groups? And I know I'm probably a broken record. I keep saying like restructure what we already have, but to make things fit for everybody, if we can. But if I don't know if anybody's open to keeping that in their minds as we're, you know, putting this together. That's basically what's on my mind, since we are a smaller group and newer. How can another group even come in and grow in this city as well? And I think all of us have, you know, non-residents, a certain amount of non-residents, and every sport seems to be so different on why, you know, there's only one rink around, so they're going to have people from everywhere. It's such a specialty field. And so I just feel like every sports group is going to have a different situation, but how do we help other groups grow and bring people to Oceanside, which when they come here, they're buying from here, buying food from here, and they're here in Oceanside. It brings them here to, you know, uplift our whole city.
Thank you for bringing that point, because that is an important point, is when you have a product that is drawing people into Oceanside and showcasing it, one, it shows off that this is a desirable place to live, but two, it creates economic impact for the city, and you know, when you have non-residents coming to play and practice, they're eating in our restaurants here in Oceanside, they're spending money here locally, and that has value too. So it's all part of the puzzle. Any last thoughts? My commitment to these meetings is to really finish on time, and I think we're pretty close to 6 o'clock. So unless there are any closing thoughts, I will adjourn us to the next meeting. I'll have to send a doodle poll to get some feedback, because the date that I published, city council chambers are taken, and we don't have the ability to meet in the library. So may need to meet on a different day. I heard traffic was horrific to park. So that's another thing to consider, is especially in February, there's an opportunity to meet on Tuesday. Let me get your feedback before we break. How many of you would be okay meeting on February 20th? That's a Tuesday instead of the 22nd, a Thursday. Okay. All right, great. Yeah.
So
Fun.
one last question. So you're going to send us kind of questionnaire type feedback forms on both the Federation and for the kind of the resident rate. Is that what's going to come next?
When
before
we
the next
meet
meeting?
in person, you're going to give me the feedback in person, but how your organization
Okay.
feels. So I'll want at that February 20th meeting, if that's when it ends up happening, I'll want you to be able to say Coastal wants us to have an athletic federation or not, wants us to charge a fee or not, wants us to be resident rate at 50% or 60% or whatever that number makes sense. I'm sorry, what is that week? Oh. Okay, and what I do need to consider is how to address feedback from folks that can't make it to the meetings, because I do want this to be an inclusive process, even if you can't attend in person. Like I said, this meeting is being recorded, and you can participate via Zoom as well. Obviously, there isn't that dialogue, which I think is really important if you can't make it in person. thank you. Have a great night. And I'll see you guys hopefully before February, but certainly in February.
I like you be like the presenter. That's well, I like it. It makes them the. It's good. Are you? Maybe a surprise birthday.
Yes. That is perfect.
All right. Yeah. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. You've been practicing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people mark. Like, all right. I'm out. Well, this was cool. Yeah. I wish I could have seen the whole thing, but
It's recorded, so.
I know it's mainly.
Yeah, I need to. Do it.
Later, man. Hey. Oh. Yeah.